There's nothing like a little competition to make a business thrive. And that's exactly what was happening in the early 20th century with Ford Motor Company. Since its humble beginnings as a small shop on Piquette Avenue, the company had grown to become the largest producer of automobiles in the world. In the case of the 1914 and a half-ton Dodge truck, the chassis was virtually identical to the Model Ts, except for the wheelbase, which was stretched by 7 inches to accommodate the cargo bed. That year, they opened a new factory in Detroit that could produce 1,000 vehicles a day, as well as a second truck plant in 1917. It was an age of jazz and flappers, of gangsters and bootleggers, of mass production and rapid industrialization. And it was also a time when millions of Americans were just starting to discover the joys of personal transportation. And as far as Horace and Charles were concerned, this was not the time to play it safe. In 1912, they introduced a new truck model that was even more impressive than the first. They introduced a new financing plan that allowed customers to pay for their vehicles in monthly installments, making it possible for almost anyone to afford a brand new car or truck. And as a result, sales took off. By 1915, Dodge was the third largest automobile manufacturer in the United States behind Ford and General Motors. Woo, hold on a second. While Chrysler's name is synonymous with the brand today, he wasn't involved with the company during its formative years. It was an immediate hit, and by 1920, Dodge was the second largest automaker in America. It was an age of prosperity and hardship, of glamour and grime, of progress and poverty. It featured testimonials from satisfied customers and highlighted the car's affordability, durability, and ease of maintenance. And it worked. Sales began to climb again, and the company's financial troubles seemed to be over. And as far as Horace and Charles were concerned, it was time to fight back. It was founded by William C. Durant in 1908 and quickly became one of the largest automakers in the world. And now it was setting its sights on Dodge. They offered a wider range of models at lower prices and with fancier features. The D23 sold like hotcakes and cemented Dodge's reputation as a maker of high-quality, high-performance vehicles. They also introduced the concept of planned obsolescence, which held that products should be designed to become obsolete as quickly as possible so that consumers would be forced to replace them more often. So be sure to stay tuned for more stories of the legendary Dodge brothers. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this video. And remember, if you like what you saw, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Thanks for watching. Before long, General Motors was eating into Dodge's market share, and the brothers knew they had to do something drastic if they wanted to survive. But the good times didn't last. The stock market crash of 1929 sent shockwaves throughout the economy, and the automotive industry was hit especially hard. Sales plummeted and factories shut down. People stopped buying new cars and started buying used ones instead. It was called the D23 Brothers Special, and it was the first mass-produced car with a V12 engine. It was also the first car with a fully synchronized gearbox, meaning that drivers no longer had to double clutch when shifting gears. And it was also the first car with a hydraulic brake system. It was fast, stylish, and packed with innovative features that made driving easier and more enjoyable than ever before. In fact, he didn't come along until 1925, 6 years after the Dodge brothers died, but that's a story for another video. But the Dodge brothers knew that this success was only temporary, and that soon they would face stiff competition from Ford and other automakers. It was also available in a variety of exciting new colors, including red, green, blue, black, gray, and white. But perhaps most importantly, it was priced very competitively at just $785. It was a 2-ton model with a 145-inch wheelbase, a 60-horsepower engine, and a top speed of 40 miles per hour. On March 16, 1916, the Dodge Motor Company was formed and its stock began trading on the New York Stock Exchange. This allowed the brothers to raise millions of dollars that they used to expand their facilities and increase production. and it also gave investors an opportunity to own a piece of the action. It could carry a load of up to 4,000 pounds. And it was available in a variety of body styles, including a platform, cab and chassis, a dump truck, a moving van, and a tank truck. The price, $850. By 1918, they were producing 100,000 vehicles a year, with about half of those being trucks. And the result was unlike anything the industry had ever seen before. Although styled in the classic quadricycle tradition, the new Dodge sedan was longer, a top speed of 55 miles per hour. It also featured a 3-position gear shift and a hand-operated throttle, as well as a fully enclosed 4-cylinder engine and a cast-iron cylinder head. All told, it was a remarkably durable vehicle with a top speed of 55 miles per hour and a payload capacity of 3,300 pounds. And it was priced very competitively, especially when compared to the Ford Model T, which retailed for $360. The Dodge was cheaper at just $250. And wider than the Model T and featured an array of innovative design elements that set it apart from the competition. For starters, it had a distinctive V-shaped hood that was shorter than most and sloped down to a single rounded nose, giving it a sleek, aerodynamic look. The front fenders were integrated into the running boards, which themselves were supported by triangular steel braces. These were not only more sturdy than the flimsy wooden blocks used by Ford, but they also gave the car a more finished appearance. And all signs pointed toward continued growth. But the brothers were concerned that their association with Ford and the Model T would ultimately limit their potential. After all, Ford's prices were so low that there was very little room for profit. And with the automotive industry already becoming highly competitive, the Dodge brothers knew they needed to do something bold if they wanted to succeed. The engine was also very similar to Ford's, but with cast-iron cylinder heads instead of aluminum. However, the similarities between the two trucks were both superficial and significant. Like the Model T, the Dodge 1/2 ton was produced entirely from standardized parts that could be swapped out easily and quickly. This meant that repair was simple and affordable, and that production time could be drastically reduced. It was also built around a central powertrain that allowed for easy conversion from a chassis cab pickup to a variety of other body styles, including a panel delivery wagon, a moving van, and a dump truck. But by the end of the teens, several new competitors were heating up the market, including one from an unlikely source. But before we get into that, well, hello there, welcome back. You know how they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery? Well, if that's true, then the Dodge brothers were the biggest fans of the Ford Motor Company. Now, the Dodge brothers, Horace and Charles, had been in the business of making high-quality, affordable vehicles since 1900, but it wasn't until the Model T came along that they really gained any serious traction. Oh, yeah. Because up until 1908, their vehicles, which were branded under the Dodge name, were actually made at the Ford Piquette Avenue plant. And although the brothers tried to emulate Henry Ford's success by keeping prices low, they appealed to a different market segment, one that demanded more durability for heavier loads. They even hired away Ford employees, including a number of skilled engineers and designers, most notably August F. Sandler, who went on to head up Dodge's design department and produce some of the most iconic vehicles of the era. In fact, the Dodges were so enamored with the Ford Model T that when they decided to launch their own line of cars, they modeled them directly after Ford's quadricycle. By 1916, the Dodge brothers had grown exponentially, thanks in no small part to the introduction of the Model T. Enter the 1910s, a decade of upheaval and transformation that saw more innovation than the previous 3 decades combined. So in 1911, they announced that they would be expanding their product line to include a passenger car of their own design. Inside, the Dodge boasted a 120-inch wheelbase and 110 horsepower, making it powerful enough to haul heavy loads without tipping over. But the Dodge brothers weren't done yet. Of course, there was still the problem of getting people to buy these things. But the Dodge brothers had a solution for that as well. So in 1916, they did something that was almost unheard of at the time. They went public. That same year, the Dodge Motor Company merged with the corporation to form the Dodge Corporation, which was headed up by Walter Chrysler. Anyway, under Chrysler's leadership, the company grew rapidly, thanks in no small part to the introduction of the 1,917 and 3/4 ton truck. And that brings us to the 1920s, a decade of economic uncertainty and social change that saw the rise of the automobile as the dominant mode of transportation. In 1924, they launched a new advertising campaign that read, "If you want the utmost in motor car dependability, Chevrolet is the car for you." But there was a new player in town, General Motors, a massive conglomerate that produced everything from cars to trucks to buses and even airplanes. Led by a charismatic leader named Charles Kettering, General Motors was more aggressive than Dodge. In 1925, they introduced the 1,926.5 ton truck, which was more powerful and efficient than ever before. However, the Dodge brothers didn't stop there. In 1927, they introduced a new car model that was unlike anything the industry had ever seen before. Unfortunately, the brothers never got to see the car's release because they both died in 1920, but by all accounts, it was a huge success, and that's where we'll pick up next time.